Hello, everyone, and welcome to Climate Talks on accessing climate finance in South Asia. Now, South Asia is reeling under the rapidly growing threat of climate change and its devastating impacts. We are already witnessing severe and frequent disasters in the region. According to the World Bank, between 1990 and 2019, climate-induced disasters in South Asia caused over US dollars of 127 billion in economic losses. A study by ADB in 2014 revealed that South Asia's cost of climate change will increase around 1.8% of its annual GDP will be lost by 2050. The impacts of climate change continuously hamper the region's endeavor to achieve sustainable growth and reduce poverty. The outcomes of the 2024 United Nations Climate Change Conference, although also known as COP29, concluded with channeling over 300 billion US dollars annually by 2035, which drastically falls short of the minimum sought by many developing countries. Moreover, two landmark reports of the first global stocktake highlights that the world is falling significantly short of achieving the Paris Agreement goals, further emphasizing the urgent need for action to address the escalating threats of climate change. Through climate finance, particularly public and private investments in adaptation and resilience building will minimize both climate and disaster risk, reduce the vulnerabilities of exposed and marginalized populations, and minimize economic losses by protecting development gains. Now, despite strong socioeconomic rationale to invest in adaptation, studies reveal that around 90% of climate finance goes into mitigation actions. Adaptation finance will address growing climate risk by investing in measures that safeguard communities, economies, and ecosystems while leveraging socioeconomic and environmental benefits to ensure resilience and sustainable development. Effective implementation of adaptation investments requires integrating climate priorities into national and local development, including economic and fiscal planning frameworks supported by tools like climate risk assessment, budget tagging, and green procurement policies. Building a strong evidence base to highlight the economic, social, and environmental benefits of adaptation is essential, with an emphasis on leveraging indigenous knowledge and innovative financing to address funding gaps. Collaboration across governments, private sector, and community stakeholders is critical, alongside capacity building for local actors to ensure inclusive, well-informed decision-making and tailored policy reforms and sustainable coordination mechanisms are also vital to overcoming barriers, while transparent monitoring and communication systems will foster trust and accountability, ensuring adaptation investments contribute meaningfully into long-term resilience and development goals. We have climate experts in our midst today to give us their perspective on climate finance in South Asia and also help us understand how cross-cutting areas such as gender, youth, and human rights can create accessible climate finance mechanisms.
The term adaptation is the evolutionary process whereby an organism becomes better able to live in its habitat. In social science, adaptation is a fundamental concept that examines how individuals and communities adjust to change in their surroundings. The progression is vital for decent living, particularly for the most marginalized and vulnerable groups. The system should enable these groups to navigate social, economic, and cultural shifts, which demands targeted program investments. In the present time, most of the governments in the world have been attempting to address their needs through the socio-economic development policies, along with earmarking the budget too. For instance, cash transfers in terms of social protection, quota in public sector services, histories in health and education institutions, and concessional fare in public transportation, and so on. In the face of climate challenges, it's essential that adaptation investments favor the most marginalized and vulnerable groups. Here is how we can make that happen. Vulnerability mapping is one method where we analyze disintegrated data based on gender, age, income, status of disability, and their domicile or location. Lobbying for investments in adaptation at the national as well as subnational levels. Raising voice for social safety nets, especially for education and healthcare services. Capacity building or developing of these groups for their empowerment, which may enable them to make decisions and take leadership. Building institutions at the local level to facilitate their periodic meetings and discussion on key issues. Ensuring participation of women, indigenous people, people with disabilities, low-income communities, and people living in remote rural regions in each phase of the project. Using and enhancing their indigenous knowledge, which they can easily adapt. Continuous monitoring, periodic reviews, and evolution of the program, ensuring transparency and accountability. And finally, specifying the role of the oversight agencies like Human Rights Commission, National Planning Commission, development partners, and other related agencies working for the cause of these groups. By adopting these methods, we can create a more inclusive and resilient future for everyone.
Accessing international climate finance is very critical for Pakistan, given its vulnerability to climate change and the constrained fiscal space that we are facing right now. Public sector can tap into several global climate finance mechanisms which are available, such as GCF Adaptation Fund, the Global Environment Facility. Additionally, we are also engaged with multilateral banks like ADB and World Bank, which are also offering climate-focused financing. To effectively access these funds, Pakistan needs to strengthen its institutional mechanisms and frameworks and align the national climate policies with global climate objectives. We need to develop robust project pipelines with co-benefits related to climate. The project should have measurable outcomes and risk mitigation strategies. So public institutions should also build technical capacity to design bankable projects, particularly in critical sectors like water management, agriculture, and disaster resilience. But we are also facing significant challenges. First of all, for the institutions like GCF, the application process is very tedious, it's very difficult. There are so many layers involved. And public sector particularly does not have the required capacity to develop such projects which are accepted at the forums like GCF. Secondly, we have a weak interagency coordination among our government agencies. The agencies sometimes are working in silos, and one agency does not know what the other is doing particularly in the realm of climate finance. And third, there is a limited data availability on climate risk, which hampers our evidence-based proposals. Then we are also facing some political and governance risk, which can deter the international donors concerned about transparency and accountability. So to overcome these barriers, it's imperative that Pakistan must invest in institutional capacity building, streamline the climate finance governance, and we also need to foster the public-private partnerships. Then there is a need to strengthen the monitoring and reporting mechanisms, which will build the confidence of donors. And last but not the least, we should also integrate our climate finance strategies into our national development plans. That will ensure a more cohesive and impactful approach to securing and utilizing international funds.